it's really a great, great privilege for me to introduce Rhonda.
Thanks, Keith. My name is Rhonda. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 29th, 1994. So I have 31 years of sobriety. Yeah, I don't believe it either, you know. I remember when I first got sober, there was a lady, her name was Annie, and Annie R., and she was taking 8 years of sobriety, and I thought, that woman is a liar, right? There is no way. There's no way you haven't done a pill or a line of Coke, or you've done something in 8 years. And then a girl took a 2-year chip, and I thought, oh, maybe, like if I was pregnant back to back or something, you know, I could get a couple years in. So I came in, I was 27 years old when I got here. I had 3 kids, and I was a cocktail waitress. I had long red hair. It was 1990. Actually, it was 1993. My sobriety date is 1994, so I smoked pot the whole first year I was here and didn't tell anybody. I was like, it's none of your business, and I didn't bother to tell anybody. And I became a Twisted Sister right around the end of 1994. It was at the Beaver Campout. If anybody's ever been up to the Beaver Campout. And I asked this lady, Connie, to take me through the steps, and she said yes. So I have lived in Las Vegas since 1974. I grew up on the east side. I was talking to somebody about that. I grew up on the east side, went to Chaparral High School, and then I moved back to Indiana, where I was born, and married my childhood sweetheart, and had a bunch of kids. And by the time I was 22, we needed to get a divorce. And so I came back to Las Vegas and got a job doing cocktails and rented a house, and that's when my drinking really took off. I started drinking I think I was 11, the first time I remember drinking. I think I always drank. You know, I think I drank. I don't think drinking was not a problem with my family, right? Like if the guys were drinking beer and you took a swig of their beer, they didn't care. Or, you know, if they were having a party at the lake and everybody was drinking, like we would grab bottles and go in the tent and drink. But the first time I got really drunk, I was in 6th grade. I was with 2 of my girlfriends, and we stole some whiskey from my dad, and we put it in orange juice, frozen orange juice, right? So we took out half of the frozen orange juice, and then we filled it up with the whiskey. And I remember singing, oh, take me by the hand, take me by the hand, pretty mama. With my 2 girlfriends at like 2 in the morning, like screaming it at the top of our lungs, and my mom coming out and saying, "What are you girls been drinking?" And we were like, "No." And then they got, you know, the next day it was a whole scene, and they could never come over again. And, you know, 2 weeks later we were back to our old games. I don't know why I started drinking. I don't. Like, I grew up, my mom was a single mom when I was little. I was the baby of 10. My mom I was my mother's only child. I had 9 brothers and sisters. My dad was like this playboy. He was 40 when I was born. So he had 9 other kids by the time I got there. And then my dad had 8 brothers and sisters. My mom had 12 brothers and sisters, and I have 9 brothers and sisters, and they all live in Indiana, and it's crazy train. And so I always felt like I was the baby, because I was the baby. I was the baby of all of it, and everybody treated me like I was the baby of all of it. So when I was 7, my mom married another guy, a drummer in a band. She loved alcoholics. She was always marrying the alcoholic man. And so she married this drummer, and we moved to Las Vegas so he could become famous, I guess. I don't know. I was 7. And I hated it out here. I'm telling you, I hated it so bad. That's when I started like rebelling against her. By the time I was 9, I was smoking cigarettes. I got kicked out of the 3rd grade for smoking cigarettes at school. And my poor mom, she was just like such the sweetest lady. And then I went, so when then my mom got divorced from him, and then we moved back to Indiana for a little while. I think I was 9. We moved back to Las Vegas. She married another guy, and he had 2 older daughters and 2 younger sons than me. And the one was 15 and I was 11. And she was the one who introduced me to everything. And by the time I was 13, I had done everything. There wasn't anything I hadn't done. I got arrested. My brothers had stolen somebody's wallet and bought a bunch of lewds. Anybody remember lewds? Oh, those were my favorite. And so I had taken 4.5 lewds. Now let me tell you, 1 lewd would knock you out. 4.5, I don't even remember half of the day. I know I went to school because they called the police and I got taken to juvie. And then I know my mom came and picked me up because I was at home when I got into the fist fight with her, and my stepdad threw me against a bed and cracked my head open. And then I left and went to my boyfriend's house, and he called my mom because I was gushing blood out of the back of my head and he didn't know what to do. So then I had to go to like a child psychiatrist or a counselor or something, and go to these drug classes where I met all of the Las Vegas teenagers who did drugs. It was fabulous. And we just had a great time. We just all, exchanged phone numbers and hung out on weekends after that. Nothing they could do could scare me away from that kind of a lifestyle. I really didn't think there was anything wrong with it. All my friends were doing it, It seemed like a normal way of life for me. I love in the big book where it says that it becomes our normal way of thinking and living, because it was my normal way of thinking and living. Now I have a 13-year-old grandson, and I would wring his neck if he did half of what I did when I was 13 years old, But times have changed. And so when I'm 13, I go to Indiana and I meet this boy. He's 14, and his favorite band is Kiss. And he used to walk around, this is like 1979, and he would walk around doing the Kiss, thing all the time. And oh my God, I fell in love with him. He was just the best thing ever. And so we vowed that, we tried to run away and get married that summer, but I was 13 and he was 14. So our parents were like, why don't you guys wait a couple years, And so my mom made me come back to Las Vegas, and we vowed that when we were 17 or 18 and 19, that we would find each other and we would get married and live happily ever after. And so at 17, I had 3 boyfriends in Las Vegas. One was my coke dealer. One was like this cowboy, he drove a truck, they were 3-wheelers back then, 3-wheeler kind of guy. And the other one, was a Jewish, nice boy. He had the Trans Am with the bird on the, the top of the hood, right? Rich little Jewish boy whose mom hated me beyond reason. And so they had all 3 found out about each other, and fights were starting to happen, and people were driving by people's houses, and it was getting ugly. And my mom says, why don't you go to Indiana and visit your grandma and pick one? For God's sake, Rhonda, just pick one, And so I go to Indiana and I get off of the airplane. I walk down the street. I say, does anybody in here know Dan W? And they say, yeah, he lives down on 4th Street. And so I go down there, and 2 weeks later I call my mom and say, I'm not coming home. I'm getting married. I'm staying in Indiana. And so I did. I stayed, and I had 2 babies. And then 2 boys, and then we moved to Las Vegas, our whole family. We all came to Las Vegas, and he was not a city boy. He was a country boy, and he couldn't handle the big city. It was just too much for him. There, he was a rock star, you know? He was in a band, he had long hair, everybody loved him, he was this hot guy. Here, he was just another guy in a rock band, you know? And so he hated it here, and I went out with my girlfriends one night to a bridal shower, and we went to a bar, and I ended up hooking up with this other guy and got pregnant. And now I'm married, and I know it's not his baby. And so I tell him the truth. I just tell him, you know, I'm pregnant and I don't think it's yours. It could be, but I don't know. And I'm 20 years old, and he says, okay, it is mine, and we're never going to mention this to anybody. And I'm like, okay. So a year later, we moved back to Indiana, and 7 days after that, I left him. I packed my car up and my kids, and I drove back to Las Vegas. And 3 months after that, I drove back to Indiana. And then about 6 months after that, I finally really left him for the last time. And I remember I was ended up at the end in a homeless shelter for battered and abused women in a town about 25 miles from where we lived. And it was a safe house. I couldn't tell him where I was. And they hooked me up with every welfare program in the state of Indiana. I mean, beyond anything that I could have imagined. They offered to send me to college to get a teaching degree. I just had to sign a 4-year contract saying I would teach there for free, daycare, gas money, my rent was paid. I mean, you name it, I was getting it, and I was suicidal. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. One, it was the first time I was completely away from drugs and alcohol, and because I had all my kids and I couldn't do the things I wanted to do and take care of my kids at the same time. And so I call my girlfriend in Las Vegas and I say, I really just want to give him the kids, and I want to kill myself. I want to be done with it. I can't do this anymore. It's not turning out the way it was supposed to. I had this 13-year-old childhood dream of how my life was going to be, and it just wasn't that way. And she said, just come home. What are you doing? Like, pack up the kids and come home. And so I did. I came home, and I got a job at the Western Hotel on Fremont Street doing cocktails. And the only reason why I got the job is because the bar manager said, if you can fit in this skirt, you can have the job. And I squeezed my little butt right into that skirt and got the job. And I started doing cocktails, and then I started making more money than I had made in a month in Indiana, sometimes in one night doing cocktails. And my grandma had moved to Las Vegas a couple of years before that, and she was living in this little one-bedroom apartment off of Maryland Parkway in Tropicana, and the Moby Grape was right there. And I love them rock and roll boys, so I start going to the Moby Grape, and I know I can't drink, right? I know that drinking I'm gonna black out or pass out, because that's always what happens when I drink. I black out or pass out. And so I start out drinking like fuzzy navels, and then a water. And then, okay, well, maybe I'll just do a shot of peppermint schnapps and and then a water, and then, well, maybe I should just have a shot of tequila because this schnapps stuff isn't really working, and then a water, right? And so it never worked out the way I wanted it to. I ended up meeting the bar manager at the El Cortez. He was also the bar manager for the Union Plaza at the time, and Jackie Gahn, who owned all of them places. And so they were like, we're going to put you on all the extra boards. And so I worked all the extra boards at the Western, the El Cortez, and the Union Plaza for probably 2 or 3 years. I got 86th from the Union Plaza. I could work there, but I couldn't hang out there. And it was because I had called in sick from one of the hotel rooms upstairs. I woke up late, like what was I supposed to do? My grandma, so I ended up getting a house on Decatur and Charleston. And my grandma moved in with me. It was a 4-bedroom house. So it was me and the kids and my grandma. And that was the worst thing anybody could have done for me, because I never came home because I knew my grandma was there taking care of the kids, right? And when people would say, don't you have kids? I'd be like, oh yeah, my grandma's taking care of them. And I really believed that if I paid all the bills and bought them bikes and they all had TVs in their rooms and, skateboards and put them in sports and did all that stuff, that I was a good mom. That even though I was never there, right? And I would stay home on my days off. I did stay home on my days off, but I never came home on my work days. I'd come home to sleep and that was it. But there was always groceries in the house, so I was a good mom. And so I'm working at the Union Plaza. I finally took like a full-time shift at the Union Plaza, and I'm working 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And if you would have breathalyzed me on any given day, you would have fired me, because I would roll in about 2 a.m. and then I would get up at 6:45 to be at work by 7 and throw my hair in a ponytail, and I would go to work. And my boss came to me one day and he said, I admitted myself to the care unit, and I had seen the care unit commercials on TV, at 3 a.m. with the wrecking ball slamming down the house and stuff. And I was like, good for you. Good job. I'm really proud of you. You needed it, And he said, have you ever thought about going? And I was like, oh, why? Like, why would I go to the care unit? I really had no idea, right? Because again, that's my normal way of life. And he said, well, sometimes you drink a little too much. Now, I had slept with this guy, so he knew I drank too much, right? It was not like he didn't know me, okay? He knew me. And he says, okay, not a big deal. And the next day he calls me into his office and he has eggs. And you know how eggs smell when you're hungover? Like, ooh, like I couldn't, it was so disgusting. And he says, are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to maybe check it out? And I was like, there's nothing. Look, I'm not the problem. He's the problem. My boyfriend at the time is the problem. Now this guy, his name was Barry. Great guy. Barry was the kind of guy that I would call him. I'd be drunk and I'd call him at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, you need to come get me. And he'd say, where are you? And I'd say 7-Eleven, and then I would hang up. And this was pre-cell phone, so, and he would be like, what 7-Eleven is she at? And he would drive around to all the 7-Elevens between my work and our house trying to find me. That's the kind of guy he was. He pulled me out of strip clubs. I'd go in there and think I was an exotic dancer. I was not. I weighed 115 pounds. I had an A cup. Nobody wanted to see that, But I'd be up on stage till security hauled my little ass off the stage, Stupid. And so finally, one day, Barry says to me, look, either you quit drinking or I'm leaving. And I was like, okay, I'll quit drinking. Not a big deal. Because I didn't, I loved him. I didn't want him to leave. And about 4 days later, that was like Valentine's Day, which I had destroyed for us. I think it was February 17th. I'm sitting at the bar at work saying, who does he think he is? He's not my dad. He can't tell me what to do. I'll drink if I want to drink, you know? And I go home and I'm like wasted drunk. And he says, you know what? That's it. I'm leaving. And I was like, I'll call the care unit in the morning. And we went to sleep, and I called in sick to work from my own house. And the next morning, I hear my grandma yelling at the kids, you guys be quiet, your mom is sick. And I hear my 8-year-old say, she's not sick, she's a drunk. And I got up and I did what all good moms do, yell at him, right? Because now it's his fault. Tell him to get to school. And I called the care unit, and I went to the care unit, and the only thing I really remember is it was raining that day, and I forgot my cigarettes, and there were somebody who worked there smoked Benson and Hedges, the really long ones. And so she was smoking like half her cigarette and then putting it out, probably for later, but I was smoking them because I had run out of cigarettes. And they took a picture of me when I walked in there, and I had like mascara running all down my face, and just, I remember going into one of the meeting rooms, and on the wall was the steps and the traditions, and I remember doing them right then and there, 1, okay, done, check, 2, check, 3, check. And when I got to 8, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, I was like, oh, I can't do this. There's no way, I can't do this. I got all the way to step 9, and that was the killer for me. And I had to go to the culinary union. I was in the culinary at the time. I had to go to the union and see the gatekeeper, for insurance. And I go in there, and he, I don't remember what they said or anything, but he said because I lied, right? Because that's what we never tell the truth when we go in and talk to people. And so he said I was good for outpatient treatment. I didn't have to go inpatient. I could do outpatient. And I'm leaving, and on the door, right beside his door is a mirror, and on the mirror it says, "You're looking at the problem." And I was like, oh, rude. People are so rude in this recovery thing. And so I start going to the care unit, and I fall in love with treatment. I was made for treatment. This girl was built to be in treatment. They had free food, they had yoga classes, they had meditation, they had, some other classes, whatever. Every time I had to give we had to do our first step in front of the group, I'd go buy a new outfit. I was made for treatment. And then they would bring people in from outside and bring AA meetings into that treatment center. And I remember there was this guy, George, and he was talking about how he had all his teeth now. I thought, oh my God, these poor people without their teeth, And turns out later, George was one of my best friends. He owned the Kiss Club, he was one of my go-to guys when I, finally got out of treatment. And so I get out of treatment, and I start going to AA meetings, because you have to, they tell you have to go to AA. And I start going, and I don't like it. I don't like it because you guys want to talk about you. I like being the center of attention. I like talking 20 times during group. I always have something to say. And in AA, you talk once, and then you shut up and listen to everybody else, and I hated that. I was like, I don't like it. And then there was a girl at the stairway meeting, and she was kind of like the girl I always wanted to be. Like, she wore the chaps and the leather coat, and just had cool hair and looked like Joan Jett. And I was like, oh, my dream girl, And she would say, I want to talk about being ungrateful. And I'm like, I love her. Let's talk about that. You know, I could talk about gratitude one more time, you know? And I would go into the meetings, and Barry and I were having a hard time of it. And I'd go into the meetings and I would talk about, you know, me and Barry breaking up and how sad it was. And I would cry and, you know, just my life is over. And this lady next to me said, and then this one meeting I was in, everybody started sharing about how they had, you know, they were on their 5th chemo treatment, and one guy had lost his granddaughter, and the lady next to me said, I used to cry because I didn't have any shoes until I met a man with no feet. And it was all these little tidbits that just started to sink in and make me feel like I was a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had worked steps 1 through 9 in the treatment with some woman who was assigned to be my sponsor. And I'm going to the KISS Club, and women are starting to ask me to sponsor them. And I say to my friend Deborah, who worked behind the counter at the KISS Club, where do you get those packets? You know, like people are starting to ask me to sponsor them, and I don't know where you get those packets. The care unit had closed down. I didn't know how I was going to take women through the steps. And she said, you take them through the book. And I was like, the book? And she was like, the big book. And she goes, you need to ask my sponsor to sponsor you. And I was like, I already have a sponsor, and she is horrible. This woman, she kept telling me, like, try wearing a bra under your see-through shirt. Maybe some panties when you wear a skirt. I don't know. Might be helpful, you know? And I remember, how am I supposed to get a husband if I'm wearing bras and panties? I don't understand. And she just was all over me, like, call me every day, and, you know, do prayer and meditation and just all this crap, right, that I didn't want to do. And so I say to Deborah, I was like, all right, I'll ask her, whatever. And I had been in AA for about a year, maybe a year and a half, just winging it, you know, just cold winging it. I thought I had worked the steps because I had done those care unit steps, and I really had no idea why I was so depressed and so sick and so angry all the time. And so we go to the Beaver campout, and Connie is there, and I remember going up to her and saying, Deborah says you take people through the big book. And I go, I already have a sponsor, and I already have to call her every day. And Connie was like, good, keep calling her every day, and we'll meet at my house on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock. And so for the next 12 weeks or 13 weeks, we met at 6 o'clock at Connie's house to do the steps. And when we got to step 4, she gave me these worksheets. We call them placemats now. We still use them. And she gave me these worksheets, and she said, I'll give you 2 weeks to get it done. And I had no idea I could procrastinate. Like, my girls today, they're like 6 months in, still not done with that. You know, I did it in 2 weeks. I just did what she told me to do. And we get to probably right around step 9, and I say to her, I don't see how any of this is going to change my life. I don't know how going and making amends to these people is going to fix anything. And she said, belief isn't required. Action is. And I jumped on an airplane and flew to Indiana and made amends to everybody I could think of at the time, and wrote letters out that I didn't read to them, but she had me write them all out before I went. And I had to go to my ex-husband's house and tell his new wife that I was sorry, that I would call there and say, can I talk to my husband, please? when him and I were still married, but she was living with him. Horrible ex-wife stuff I did to them. And then I guess I was about, I went to make amends with my mom. My mom was probably probably my biggest amends, because I had just treated her like she didn't matter, like she was born to provide for me. That's how I treated her, right? Everything she did was for me. And so I went to her, and my sponsor was, you need to be specific. You don't get to say I stole from you, right? You get to say, I stole from you this time, I stole from you this time, I stole this from you, and so I did. I went to my mom, and everything that I had ever done to her that I could recall, I said, I did all these things, and I wanna make it right, I wanna fix it, I wanna mend it. I said, is there anything I have forgotten? And she said, oh, honey, you forgot a lot. My mom was good. And then I said, and I have no idea how much money I owe you. Because all those trips back and forth to Indiana were on my mom's dime, not mine. I didn't have any money. And she said, $4,682.42. And then the famous, how can I fix this? How can I make it right? And she said, you could spend more time with me. And I went home and called my sponsor and said, is there a dollar amount for you could spend more time with me? Because that is the last thing I wanted to do. And she said, no, but what day do you and your mom have off in common? And it was Tuesdays. And so I started going to my mom's house every Tuesday, and we would do things like bake or sew, or I don't know, make decorations for whatever month it was. And I went every month, or every week, every Tuesday. And then one Tuesday she said, I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday, I'd like you to come with me. And I went, and she was diagnosed with this rare form of cancer. She was like the 11th case in the world to get this form of cancer, and they had zero treatment available for it. And they could try a bunch of stuff, but she was gonna die in the next 2 years. And so for the next year, we went on Tuesdays to chemo and radiation and wherever else she wanted to go, because then I was in. And I think the universe just has a way of setting me up so that I can do these things, If I hadn't spent that year with her, going to her house on Tuesdays, I probably just would have said, let's get you a nurse. Let's put you in some kind of nursing care or something, And a year after that, she moved in with me. We had to sell all of her stuff and give it all away to family members and, all that stuff. And that year was the hardest and the greatest year of my life, because I got to help her and keep her comfortable and in a home where she had grandkids driving her crazy every day. And I got to take her to all, and I didn't even tell you guys the best part. I had gotten married again right before this. So, this is a good story. I gotta tell you guys. So, I'm dating this guy in AA, kind of a popular guy, and I'm dating this guy, and it was the second time I had dated him. I had broke up with him before because I wanted to date this other guy. I was a horrible newcomer, I really was. And so I'm dating this guy, and then I meet this crap dealer where I work, and he's a normie guy. And so I start dating him too. And then the crap dealer breaks up with me. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm still dating this other guy. And then I'm painting my kitchen. I had spent the night with the AA guy. I go home. I'm in black shorts and a red Kiss Club t-shirt with my hair in a bun, and the crap dealer guy comes over and he says, I'm sorry, I want to get back together. And I was like, no. I'm already, I already have a boyfriend. I can't. And he's like, well, and I go, and I'm going to Builder Square to get more paint. And he said, well, let me come with you. And so we go into Builders Square, and he bumps into me, and he says, I really love you. And I said, I really love you too. And he said, let's get married. And I said, okay. And so we got in my car, and we drove to Sears and bought matching wedding bands, and we drove downtown and got a marriage license. And then we went to the Elvis place and got married. And then we went home, and I drove down to where this AA guy worked. And I said, I can't go to San Francisco with you this weekend. And he said, why not? And I said, because my husband won't let me. That was me at 3 years sober. Yeah. So me and this guy get married, and I really think that the universe gave me what I needed, right? Because he was there as long as my mom needed him to be there. And he was that second income in my home, so I only worked 3 days a week when he was there, because we could afford it. I could stay at home with my mom. He was a great caretaker for my mom. And she died. She died in February, and exactly 1 year later, he left me in February. That was February of 2000. And now I'm 6 years sober. So he didn't just leave, right? They never just leave. I was gambling all of our money away. I was lying to him about gambling. I had another boyfriend on the side that I was sleeping with. I was lying about the boyfriend. And so he left. He had reasons to leave, and I remember going to my sponsor and being like, why can't I find a guy who just loves me for who I am? And she was like, a lying, cheating, gambling whore? You want a man who wants a lying, cheating, gambling whore. And I really think that the steps kind of coincide with your years of sobriety. So if you're 6 years sober today, you're probably feeling those character defects pretty good, and that's exactly where I was. Like, those character defects were just popping up, popping in, and and so I'm sitting at now the Steps Club has opened. You guys see a pattern here. I'm just a club girl. The clubs were just like bars for me, right? You just go there and hang out at the club and pick up guys. Instead of drinking beer, I was drinking coffee all day, right? Same exact MO. And so I'm sitting at the Steps Club counter, and this guy comes up, and I'm crying. I'm like snotball crying, right? I'm like crying and complaining to the girl behind the counter, Lee, and I'm like, and then this guy comes up and he taps me on the shoulder and he says, hey, I heard you're getting divorced, and I just want to get in there before somebody else does. And that's the kind of life I set up for myself, right? Like, I created that, I created that. And I turned around and I said, I don't want to date a guy who wants to date a girl as sick as I am right now. And that was the first time in my life that I had ever done that. And it was like God had just pulled that character defect right out of me, because my motto is the best way to get over one is to get under another. That's always been my motto, And so for me to not jump on that right away and have him fix me, right, was the first time I had ever said no to that. And I told all my friends and all my girlfriends, that's it, I'm staying single. I couldn't commit to that whole year thing. I didn't put a timeline on it. I just knew I was staying single. And so for the rest of that year, or for the rest of that spring and halfway into the summer, me and my girlfriend, I just hung out with my girlfriends. I just did girl stuff. And I didn't date anyone. When men would ask me out, I would say no. except for one fireman from Canada, but he didn't live here. I don't think he counted. And then one day I'm having a party at my house. It was the middle of July, July 22nd. I'm having this birthday party for one of the girls, one of my girlfriends. She was turning 3, and she's now 27, which blows me away. Or 28, I think she's 28. Little Lori, do you remember little Dyke Lori? Yeah, one of my best friends. She was turning 3, and we were having this, I had just put in a pool at my house, and we're having this big pool party, and my friend Heather calls, not this Heather, this other one, and she says, hey, can I bring Paul to the party? And I was like, yeah, and bring some potato salad, because we're out, you know? And so she brings Paul to the party, and during the party, Paul says to me, hey, do you want to go to dinner tonight? And I was like, yeah. Because I was so used to going in a group. Like, I thought we were all going to dinner that night, right? I thought we were all going to dinner. And so the party ends, and I get dressed, and I go to the Steps Club, and there's Paul, and he's in like a silk shirt, and it was 2000, gel in his hair, so cute. Those loafer shoes that golfers wear, just such a cutie. And I'm like, is it just me and you? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, because I had known Paul for a couple years, not a date interest for me, right? But definitely friends. And so I'm like, okay. And this past July 22nd, we celebrated 25 years. Yeah, we've been together this whole time. We even have a grandson that was born on our anniversary, he just turned 5. So my first 6 or 7 years of sobriety were pretty much the same Rhonda, just without drinking, right? Like, not much changed. The only thing is I didn't drink during those years. And the more I worked with Connie, and the more I started sponsoring women, the more the big book started to get ingrained in me. I think I was 2 or 3 years sober when I joined the Las Vegas Roundup Committee. I was on that committee for 14 years. Yeah, I was the chairman of the Las Vegas Roundup. I wore this ball gown. Oh my God, it was beautiful. So much fun doing that roundup. And I learned so much. And it's things that I use in my life today that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm not sure I would have learned being a cocktail waitress at the Union Plaza. Like, when I was on the Roundup Committee, Microsoft Word and Excel came out. And now that's pretty common. Everybody knows how to use Word and Excel. But back in the day, in 1994, 96, nobody knew how to use Word or Excel. And I learned that stuff and started implementing it into Las Vegas Roundup, right? How to make a flyer. Just basic stuff that I learned back then that I have used throughout my whole adult career life. I quit doing cocktails, I think 2001. I got fired. I didn't quit. I was a no-call, no-show, and I just didn't fight it. I was done. I was done getting people drunk. It was really starting to bother me. I was 7, almost 8 years sober, and I couldn't, people would come in that I knew, people that I loved would come in and drink where I worked, and it broke my heart, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I quit gambling December of 2000, so I haven't made a bet in almost 25 years, which for me is really a huge lesson, because I haven't had a drink since the day I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I don't know that suffering and that humiliation of coming in and out of the room, of raising my hand, of drinking. I've never had the head full of AA, belly full of booze, but I spent 8 years in GA raising my hand as a newcomer. And I know that humiliation. And I know the point of hopelessness that that took me to. I never wanted to kill myself over drinking, but I did want to kill myself over gambling. And I thank God that I finally was willing enough to go into GA instead of trying to use my AA program to stop gambling. I went into GA and dove in head first because I could not stop gambling. 100% hopeless apart from divine help, for sure. So after I stopped the Roundup committee, I joined, my home group was looking for a GSR. And so I was like, ugh, is that where you go to Tonopah? Like, nobody wants to go to Tonopah, you know? And I became a GSR for my home group, and I was the GSR for 3 years because we were in the middle of a rotation, and it's a 2-year commitment. But if you come in the middle, that makes it a 3-year commitment. And so I came in the middle, and of course I was the GSR for 3 years. And that's the general service, the general service representative. That's the group representative to general service. And then after that commitment was up, I became the DCM, which is a district committee member. And in AA is split up kind of like the United States, right? There's districts, and then there's areas, and then there's regions, and then there's AAWS, AA World Services. And so I became a DCM for District 5B, and then after that, I was voted in as our archivist for this area, Nevada Area 42, archivist, and that's a 4-year commitment, and that was the funnest thing I ever did. I got to interview old timers, and we had this meeting called Artifacts where we would have 4 or 5 people on the panel come up and talk about the old days in AA. It was super fun. We had a great time doing it. And after I was archivist, I was voted in as alternate delegate. And then after I was alternate delegate, I was voted in as delegate. And I was like, I have arrived. I am officially the delegate of Nevada Area 42. And that was 2019, and it's a 2-year commitment. And so 2019 was the best year of my life, and then 2020 happened. And in 2020, I was supposed to go to the international as a delegate. There was a forum coming to Las Vegas. I was going to be delegate. I was going to New York City as a delegate. I had speaking gigs all over the state of Nevada and California as a delegate. And then 2020 happened, and I didn't get to do any of that. I did a lot of online stuff, which was fun, and I'm really grateful for it. But being a delegate is a huge responsibility for, I don't even know if you guys know what I'm talking about. So when anything is changed in Alcoholics Anonymous, it goes through AA World Services, GSO in New York, and your delegate carries that message from your group, district, area to New York, and they vote for you. So the Plain Language Big Book that just came out, your delegate took a yes or a no, whatever it was that we voted on at the area. He took that to New York and voted yes or no in New York for the Plain Language Big Book. And so it's really important that we go to our business meetings and that we have a voice in Alcoholics Anonymous, because do you know how many complaints I've had about the Plain Language Big Book? And I asked them one question: did you vote? Vote what? Because we don't know that we are the voice of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? The groups make the decisions for Alcoholics Anonymous, not the other way around. And so now in the fall, I'll be standing for the Pacific Region Trustee, which I'm super excited about, because there are 15 areas in the Pacific region, and if I'm a trustee, then I get to lead all the delegates from all those 15 areas, and I get to go back to New York, and so I'm super excited that I get the nomination for that. I have 25 seconds to tell you that when I was about 7 years sober, a man knocked on my door and asked me if he could get a blood test for my son, the one that my husband said was his. And I said, I need to talk to my sponsor. And I called my sponsor, and she said, "You never told me that story." And I said, it wasn't a story, right? It wasn't a story. Danny was his dad. And so it turns out Johnny was his dad, and they created a relationship, and I got to stay out of that. He was 13 years old. And so I've got to see a lot of things come full circle. When you're sober for 30 years, 31 years, you get to see a lot of things start and then come back around. And if I can give you guys one message: one, join your home group, go to business meetings, and two, don't pick up a drink no matter what. Thanks.